Hello class, welcome to the final segment in lecture 22, and this final segment we're going to take a point illustrated in the previous segment and really illustrate what exactly we mean by that. So in the previous segment we talked about how high values of significant tornado index aren't going to guarantee that you're going to have a massive tornado outbreak. And here we're going to illustrate some cases where you have really high values of STP being reported, significant tornado index being reported, but the severe weather event was actually pretty underwhelming. So we'll go ahead and take a look at this particular case. So this is a forecast sounding from the North American model. And if you look at the significant tornado index values, maybe you can't see this on the video, but the significant tornado index values about 4 to 5, which if you look at the box and whisker plot over here, that tells you EF3 or EF4 tornadoes have occurred in environments similar to this. But if you want, even feel free to pause the video and take a look at this sounding to see if you can spot any weaknesses in it. That might skew the reality of the significant tornado index value, or skew the effectiveness of the significant tornado index value. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that. So there are several potential weaknesses that you could pinpoint in this particular sounding. But the primary one is the fact that you've got an S-shaped hodograph here. So that indicates that you have a veer-back-veer profile, and you're going to have a tendency for messier storm modes. In fact, this is a sounding, if you look at the data up here, this is from April 26, 2016, which is a pretty infamous date in the meteorology community because 7 days out, it looked like there was going to be a big severe weather event. And it turned out to be not a whole lot to remember. It was a severe weather event, but it wasn't the massive tornado outbreak that it was indicated to be early on. And the main reason why this wasn't a tornado outbreak was you had this veer-back-veer profile. There were storms that went up, they were messy, they quickly became linear, and so you didn't really have much in the way of tornadoes forming that day. So here's another case. This one I want to ask you to pause the video because there's information on here that you can't really obtain from a sounding. And this is from an event that was really heavily hyped up on social media. This is from April 13th, 2019. There were tornadoes this day, but it wasn't the massive tornado outbreak that some people claim was going to happen. And if you look at the wind profile here, there's a very dynamic profile present here. Very strong veering, nice clockwise curvature in the hodograph, but the issue, and significant tornado index values between 9 and 10, but the issue that with this day is too many thunderstorms went up in the warm sector. So you had a bunch of thunderstorms that were basically fighting each other for energy, and so they really couldn't get much done as far as tornadoes were concerned. There were some tornadoes on that day, including a couple of significant tornadoes, but it wasn't really a massive outbreak. And another case, this one even more extreme. So here you have a significant tornado index values of 13 to 18. That's pretty darn high. You don't see values like that very often. But this is from May 20th, 2019. Again, expected to be a very big severe weather day, but the failure mode for this day is you didn't really have very much in the way of supercells forming at all. In fact, the thunderstorm, it was a cold front that was approaching from the northwest. The storms went up along the cold front, went linear very quickly, and you didn't have a whole lot of thunderstorms forming ahead of the cold front. So you did end up with tornadoes, but it wasn't really much of a severe weather day. And I know that there are some people at the Storm Prediction Center who would like to forget they even forecasted this event because it was actually pretty underwhelming for the amount of hype that was around it. But again, this is just to sort of illustrate the point that I was making in the previous segment about how even though you might have very high values of significant tornado index, it's not going to guarantee that you're going to have a significant severe weather event. So just something to keep in mind when a severe weather season rolls around again. Just because you see high values of significant tornado index, don't get too excited because there might be other factors that might limit the potential for a tornado event of some kind. So just something to keep in mind. And when you see something like this on social media, someone hyping up high values of significant tornado index, just keep in mind what we talked about in these segments about how significant tornado index isn't the solution to everything. It's a tool, but tools only work well when they're properly used. And the only way to really get good use out of this parameter is to keep in mind there are some things it is neglecting, and you have to examine those factors that are being neglected by the index calculation. But that's going to do it for this final segment. And that is also going to do it for lecture 22. And in the next lecture, we're going to talk a little bit about how to identify hazards on soundings on skew-T diagrams, which is what you see on the screen here, and how to diagnose when an environment might be favorable for certain types of weather hazards in the atmosphere. So with that, I will see you all in the next lecture.